So this week's presentation is on JP Morgan and the Rascals of Finance. No,
cheeky.
Rascals. Yeah, some Rascals of Finance, because I don't want to imply that this is anywhere close to all of them. So this man here is Charles Yates.
Yates?
Yerkes?
Look at that moustache.
That is a good moustache.
Wowzer. That is a hefty moustache.
Wow.
So this guy owned a lot of the railway in America and was invited to London to consider perhaps investing in the tube in the underground.
Yeah.
But so JP Morgan at the time had a deal with Parliament that provided he could work with this other company, he was going to make the Piccadilly City North East London Railway, which goes through Piccadilly, the city in North East London. But that would have scuppered Charles Yerkes' plans. So Yerkes bought the company that JP Morgan had to work with to build his railway so that he himself could have a monopoly of the London Underground. JP Morgan described this as the greatest rascality and conspiracy I ever heard of.
I think it does sound a bit like rascality and conspiracy.
And
rascality is part of my vocabulary from this point onwards.
Well, that is good to know. What is rascality? Okay, so the images included here, I will justify them thus. Rascality just makes me think of scrumping, and also
that's
like
rascally
maybe
behaviour.
Yeah, maybe like a collective noun for a group of corvids, like a rascal of crows, rascality of ravens, something like that. In history, it meant the lower class, and then when people realised that wealthy people could be rascals too, it meant a knave, a deceiver.
I'd argue that wealthy people are mostly rascals.
I would also argue that. Most insults come from just words used to describe working class people.
Yeah, working class people are minorities.
Yep. Absolutely. It's actually a more common word than I realised, including in like legal definitions. So I show you here Fiscal Rascality Index to measure...
Rascality Index? No way!
Fiscal Rascality Index is a tool used to measure Nigeria's budget and how rascally it is. how imprudent the budgeters are being.
Is this a measurable... Is rascality a measurable thing?
Apparently it is.
Well, you know what? It's a composite index. But then it also... rascality in this context seems to be the opposite of responsibility, which I just thought that it was lovely that they bothered with the kind of fanciful...
It's very poetic.
Yeah.
There is a word that means the opposite of responsible, though.
Yeah.
It's called irresponsible.
Yeah, exactly. So this here is a little quote from legal proceedings. There was some purported corruption whilst Bill Clinton was mayor of Arkansas. And I want you to know that this involved both high rascality and widespread rascality.
Both high and widespread.
Both high and widespread. And you'll notice that Mr. Dingle is the person who uses this phrase. Mr. Dingle also describes people as knaves and know-nothings. I don't know what's going on there, but I like it. I didn't really manage to figure out the extent to which this word is just used. It's just normal for people
I've never heard
who
it
speak
before.
with legal language. Yeah. But who else might be rascals? Let's talk about Morganisation. Do you know the process by which JP Morgan, like, monopolized industries.
I truly do not.
No.
Basically, it involved...
Is this going to be another story that makes me question my faith in humanity?
Well, if you
only in
thought...
capitalists, I'm sure you didn't have much to begin with.
Yeah.
No.
So JP Morgan would identify struggling companies in the industry that he wanted to monopolize. He eventually did this with steel, electricity, and railways. And he would buy them. And then he would cut prices drastically so that other companies couldn't compete. So he'd force the other companies in the industry to bankruptcy, and then he'd buy them up.
Right.
And then obviously he'd cut wages and workforce.
Yeah, that's what Uber's doing now, for example, and like, you know, Amazon with everything and books, and it's just like, that's how they work. That's how people get to be billionaires. That is the pretty much only way they get to be billionaires.
It's by not being very nice people.
Elon Musk went from being like the third or fourth richest man to being the richest man since November.
Yeah.
Which I guess is mostly to do with stock prices, so whatever. But anyway.
I mean, it helps that he was the son of a diamond miner.
The Guardian.
Emeralds, I think.
There's an article in The Guardian that's about like how he's gone from being a bullied school kid to the world's richest man, and I just don't see anything in there saying that that's a bad thing.
And he was already rich. He was already rich. He's now the world's most bullied man because I've seen his Twitter replies, but it just doesn't have any effect on him. So
he is definitely a rascal. Does anybody think that Morgan is a rascal yet?
Oh, I mean,
like on the
high rascality index on this
high
one.
rascality, widespread rascality.
Widespread rascality.
Might even say he has wide and thick.
Oh yeah, this is actually a quote from him when he was asked if he liked competition. He said, "I like a little competition."
Oh, that's good. Oh my god. Also, this is not a high quality political cartoon, is it? They're never any good. They're just labelling Monopoly whiskey. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I know. What's this little competition? Is it
political cartoons are the lowest form of both art and comedy.
I would agree.
There are a few rare exceptions.
I want to talk for a minute about some other rascals and the Panic of 1907. So there were these two guys, right, called Augustus Hines and Charles Morse, and they owned a significant share of a copper company.
Did they also make baked beans?
That's what I was going to say. Is that how they came into the beans business?
They realised that short sellers were trying to short stocks of copper, right? So they short selling involves borrowing stocks, selling them at a high price, waiting for the market to go down, buying them back at a low price, and then giving them back. So you make your own money off somebody else's stocks, basically. But Hines and Morse figured they would buy the stock from the short sellers. They had held enough stock that these guys were screwed, right? They wouldn't be able to buy it back in order to give it to the guys without just... They could basically set the prices. So they sold the stock back to the short sellers at a higher price than they bought it for.
Right.
So it's basically terrible people scamming terrible people.
Yeah.
Yes, terrible people scamming terrible people, but at some point it stopped working. The price of the copper company started falling because somebody was releasing large amounts of copper stock. And that person was Rockefeller, because Augustus Hines at some point had pissed off Rockefeller. He'd swindled him in some way, and now Rockefeller was getting his own back.
Taking revenge on other capitalists by just releasing commodities that everybody needs and relies on.
Yeah, so someone probably went homeless because some
Many.
rich people had a bit of a feud.
Many people.
Right.
So all of a sudden, Hines and Morse were in trouble, and basically the way they funded themselves was by owning banks. So these banks and trusts were in trouble. they quickly got rid of Charles Morse. So the banks owned by Hines and Morse went to JP Morgan to ask for a loan. But the thing is that Charles Morse had pissed off JP Morgan. So Morgan refused. So one trust, the Knickerbocker Trust, went...
Oh, that's a fun name.
There was a run on the Knickerbocker Trust. They had to close their doors.
Is that
so suddenly there were
here,
runs
then?
on...
The Knickerbocker had to close their drawers.
Yeah, So, suddenly there were runs on lots of banks, and not just the banks belonging to Hines and Morse, including the bank, just everybody's banks. And then JP Morgan, realising that this was going to affect his own wallet, then he stepped in to help out. But
play
by
with
the
fire.
time...
You play with fire, you're going to get burnt, JP Morgan.
By the time he did that, productivity in the United States had fallen 11% and unemployment had increased 8%. Right.
This is the context in which the original landlord's game, the anti-capitalist monopoly game, was created.
It has been speculated, and if you're watching this after Natalie's episode on Monopoly has been uploaded, you may recognise this man as maybe the Monopoly Man. Towards the end of his life, he started wearing a monocle and a top hat.
Oh my god, no way. Okay.
Maybe.
The archetypal monopoly capitalist.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he really didn't care about the regular people until it started affecting his own wallet.
Of course he didn't.
What an horrible little man. What an horrible little man.
I might describe that as rascally.
Rascality.
Yeah, I think you're right. That is very rascally.
The rascality of it.
Yeah.
It's very like, it's just no different to European royal families. They're all related to each other, and then they're all screwing each other over, and in the process, millions of people die. And they don't give a shit because those people are their property in their heads.
Yeah. So what's JP Morgan's legacy? Well, in September of last year, JP Morgan Chase & Co. had to pay $1 billion because they were manipulating the market of metals futures. Basically like placing orders and then cancelling them so like they could artificially inflate prices.
Oh, that is rascally.
That's rascally, and I don't want to leave anybody watching this thinking that this is anything except the norm. Whether or not this specific thing has been regulated against and people are actually enforcing regulations doesn't mean that rascality, and like not in the fun scrumping way, is not just everyday business.
Scrumping leeks from the next door field. Not like that.
Never doing that.
I've never done such a thing.
I once went scrumping in the middle of London.
Ooh, what'd you get from where?
Thing is, it was a bit of a mistake because I bit into it and there was like a worm in it.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a bad idea.
No. Yeah, and I searched for a very short amount of time. I searched to find an example of JP Morgan Chase and Co. doing something rascally.
That's the thing, like, we talk about these things like conspiracies, and, they are, as in these people are literally, like, conspiring with each other to break the law, but it all ends up on Wikipedia. Like, all that information is just so readily available. It's just about, like, actually making people feel like they can do anything about it.
It's a sad state of the world.
It truly is.
The regulatory environment has changed a lot since JP Morgan was alive, but we've still got just insane billionaires. You just can't be you can't be that rich and be good.
No.
You know what I think would fix all of it? If you just made Mr. JP Morgan Ms. JP Morgan.
Nailed it.
Solved.
Which you'll find out all about next week.